enterprise security and infrastructure head. Also, we have Mr. Cyril of Ooredoo, the Director of Strategic Accounts. We have Dr. Carl from Fortinet, Senior Director of Product Management. We have Joel from Microsoft, who's the Senior Program Manager. And we have Herve, CTO of TF1, and I'm sure I pronounced your name correctly. Good, I've been training before. Gentlemen, I'd like to make this dialogue as open as you like. Feel free to jump in and answer the question, discuss, agree, and even better, disagree when you feel you want to express your opinion and make this a very dynamic session. So we'll take questions from the audience at the end of the discussion panel. So my first question for you is, what are the key security implications of moving to the cloud, and what does it mean in the context of the media and the broadcast industry? And maybe let's start from Asif here.
All right. First of all, I suppose we thank everyone for staying back after lunch. I think Harun should have said that in his speech, but it seems like we've still got a decent turnout after lunch and you're not all falling asleep. But anyway, so I think the question in itself, I think we need to step back a bit because there's quite a few aspects to this question that needs to be addressed. Primarily, if we look at what constitutes an IT service, a service, right? Generally, in a corporate environment, any environment, we have a data center, then we have compute power, we have storage, we have networking, right? So they are physical entities within an environment that constitutes the basis of running any service. And then after that, you have operating system, maybe you have some sort of logical networking, you have an application stack, right? And then you have supporting services like directory services, encryption services. And then on top of that, you have access control, all right, to your application. You have endpoints which you need to manage. You got also, on top of that, the data, all right? So if you're talking about a corporate environment which is on-prem, you as an organization entity, you're responsible for the whole stack, end-to-end, from physical data center all the way to data sovereignty, data management and governance. So, sure. And then if you move to what cloud model you follow, if it's on-prem, I mean, if it's public cloud, if it's a private cloud, or if it's hybrid, it changes again. It also changes if you, so we know that from cloud services, you have the three famous acronyms, which is infrastructure as a service, you have platform as a service, and then you have software as a service. And if we moved to say infrastructure as a service, so I'm going to go and outsource, I'm going to outsource only I'm only going to outsource my physical components to the CSP, which is a cloud service provider. The rest of the security I have to do, all right? So I have to manage the operating system, I have to manage the network, I have to manage the application, I have to manage the access control. Then if you move along for platform as a service, which is an environment where you can develop on, again, it's a shared model. Some of it is with you, some of it is with the service, cloud service provider. And then if you go to software as a service, again, it's a bit different, whereby you're just going to manage access control and you're going to manage the data governance and security of the data.
So just to pause there for a second, you're describing the entire technology stack, and you're saying depending on the different cloud model you're adopting, you will delegate parts of that stack to the cloud provider, and you will also delegate the security of that part as well?
Yeah, so let's say infrastructure as a service, right? Infrastructure as a service, the physical data center is with the cloud service provider. The compute power is with the cloud service provider, and so is storage, and so is networking. Sure. So you will never touch that. But once you, after that layer, the operating system, that's going to be with you, and you're going to be responsible for actually securing the operating system. Any logical networking on top, you're responsible for securing that. So that's, I mean, this submodel, and then I think you have to go back to say, okay, what's an asset, all right? If you understand asset is just data, that's something, then you have gone to the software as a service. If your asset is the operating system as well, so you're going to have to manage that and make sure you have security and control over the operating system, the application. So it depends, as an organization, where on the cloud model that you step on. If you step on infrastructure service, you have to take security a different angle than if you do just take in an email service, right? So it varies. Now, each organization, depending on how they adopt cloud, they have to take a different approach towards what they're going to do in terms of what controls they need to put into place.
Makes sense. Okay. Does anyone need to add anything on this?
I think to understand the security implications of going cloud for the media industry, I think the first fundamental question that I would want to ask is, what's the purpose of going the cloud route? Right? So there are multiple drivers for going cloud. So if it's about scaling and it's merely about scaling, then the security implications are different. If it's about crowdsourcing and content gathering through crowdsourcing, then the security implications are different. So basis the drivers, the business drivers, I think the security implications vary. And that's how you also then start planning how the security schema is going to work. I think for me, the strategy of the media organization or the broadcast of what they want to do by going cloud will determine the security implications of that.
Great. You want to add?
I just want to make a point, particularly the point you made about scaling. From our point of view as a network security vendor, the networks are changing quite rapidly. So we were talking originally about on-prem, and on-prem network security has been relatively simple. That's a very big generalization, sure. But you had a network edge. There was a defined edge to the network. As things have changed with the addition of bring your own device, so people bringing devices into the network, and people working from home, and particularly things like, especially here, journalists who are submitting work remotely, the network edges began to blur. As we've got to the cloud, the network edge had been destroyed. We need to have security everywhere. We need security on-prem, off-prem, in the cloud, in the virtual, in the private cloud. So it's very important to have network security right the way across your infrastructure. Scalability is incredibly important. So taking what used to be an on-prem device and just putting it in a cloud doesn't really work. You need to have that scalability. As an example, one of our customers is Pittsburgh Steelers, who you probably don't know. They're an American football team in the US, and you might think, this is a media conference, why are you talking about them? It's very relevant to them because they have, we put in a wireless network and secure their cloud infrastructure. They have no traffic, no media traffic at all, 6 days a week. 1 day a week, they get 70,000 people turning up to their stadium, all with wireless access, all watching their videos, which they're broadcasting online. It might be pre-game videos about the team, or it might be mid-match foul videos where they're looking to see exactly what happened during the match. So they're scaling from nothing to a huge amount of traffic. And whatever you choose as a security solution has to scale in exactly the same way.
Sure.
To take that one step further, though, if you're scaling as well, you're going to add in servers that weren't there 10 minutes ago. Your security solution has to be automated. You can't have all these devices being added to your network and then your security solution waiting for somebody to press buttons anymore. Those days have gone. It has to be automated. And the likelihood of somebody having to make a quick change to a security system is where you get mistakes. So automation, scalability and automation are absolutely key in this industry.
And you're saying we need to build security in that process, in the scaling and automation process?
All you had
pre-build that.
Yeah, that scalability and that automation needs to be built into your security solutions. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay. Joel, you want to add to that? Or?
Yeah, sure. There are, in particular, the way to avoid some of the common infrastructure pitfalls is to recognize that the security mechanisms that you have in place in your on-premise environment today, these things don't go away in the future. People, I think in general, tend to view the cloud as this great democratizing platform, which it is, but that, that they're going to somehow inherit the security capabilities of the cloud. And certainly, as Asif mentioned, when you look across the different operational modes of the cloud, from infrastructure to platform to software services, there are certainly capabilities that you can take advantage of that your cloud provider will bring, but you can't assume that just because the cloud environment, as provided to you, is certified and it is secured and locked down from an infrastructure perspective, doesn't mean that the stuff that you put in it is going to be protected by default. So it's very important to look at what is it that you're moving into the cloud, how are you going to be placing it there, who's going to access it, and then build your approach to security, your end-to-end strategy based on those different elements, and know that the security capabilities that you had before need to be brought into the cloud universe, and you can't just rely on something that's being provided.
Which means not just a technology transformation, but you have to also think about the process and the people aspect of it as you move to the cloud. That's a very good point, actually. Mr. Herve, did you want to add to that question, or we can jump to the next question, which is related to...
No, just had a few comments on that one.
Okay.
As a broadcaster and a media group, for TF1, the situation is, of course, a bit different because, we're coming from a different story. And as a broadcast company, we are using a lot of different suppliers and vendors in our systems. Most of them in the broadcast industry are small vendors. And our point regarding security 5 years or 10 years ago was weakness. That was the standpoint. Many vendors, the big names of the broadcast industry, didn't really take into account cybersecurity till very recently. So moving to the cloud, to answer your question, we think that it is almost a progress, because most of those vendors, if they want to survive, they will have to address the security reason and the security issues that they didn't in the past. So our system for broadcast are not, I'm responsible for the television part, but also for the corporate IT. Mm-hmm. Corporate IT, we got off-the-shelf solution from many vendors to make sure that we got secure systems. I don't know if they are, but they are sold to be so. In broadcast, we are designing system integration. We are usually our own integrator for systems, and so I think that cloud will probably provide us with more security. It doesn't mean that it will be a turnkey system from Microsoft or Amazon to gather the security, but I think that it's probably something that will help us instead of trying to convince on our own Avid, Dalet, Visorti or whatever to take the security at a good level. Once again, because we are a small industry, the broadcast industry, where we are not the telco and the players are not dealing with security at the good level yet.
Sure. Very, very well. So just to jump to the next question, and maybe I'll start on your end if you want to take it, just because it has to do with the 2015 hack of the French TV channel TV Monday 5. 3 years ago, 2015, the channel, all channels, actually 12 channels, were brought down for almost 24 hours due to a cybersecurity incident. So we're seeing the impact, and in this tough environment, do media organizations need to rethink their security strategy across the entire content delivery chain?
Yeah, sure. Of course, TV5 was a key example that probably opened eyes of many people. On my own, I've been touched by an event before, which was the Sony picture in Culver City, which was a kind of for 5-6 months before. I think it was November the year before. And we realized with this Sony Picture issue that, yes, the media industry was, could be in the center of the cyber war. And we decided to completely rethink our cybersecurity from the Sony Picture. And lucky for us, the day before TV5 was attacked, was on a Tuesday. The Monday, some company worked with us and started a big study of our system. And it was Airbus, the plane manufacturer. They are also good. They got a department called Airbus Space and Defense, and they started working with TF1 the day before TV5 was attacked. So I think we were a bit in advance, and we didn't react. We had people on board and starting to look at our system. And yes, since that, we are probably completely changing our way of making and running our systems. And now the security guy in my team really is involved in the design phase of the project, where a few years ago we first made a system and then asked the security guy to check it. And of course, he wasn't happy with that, and it was very complex to fix. That was the story on all projects. Now we really have security rules that we are talking with the supplier I mentioned just before, with our engineering teams, and sometimes I have to make decision to say yes to the security guy and no to the broadcast engineering team, to make sure that we put the good firewall, the good authentication method and so on in place. So I think that yes, Sony Picture, TV5, they changed the game, but even this year with HBO and Game of Thrones, yes, media is for us center of the cyber risk. Right. For TF1, we don't have such critical content like HBO. It's not our business to produce that high level original content. Sure. But we got an incredible audience. The 1 p.m. show in France is about 40% market share, and the 8 p.m. show is about 25% market share. So we know that the two main risks for us is first, some hacker that try to destroy our system, more like a challenge to say, okay, we can, TF1 is big, is powerful, and we will put it down. And the other one is that we are really looking at is media substitution. That somebody substitution. That somebody will replace a content by another content, and when we will press the play button.
Integrity of the data and the authenticity of the data, basically.
Yeah, but what we would like to avoid is to press the button and not to have the content we expected on air.
Sure.
And these are the two main concerns we are looking at on a daily basis. And it's really one of the only line of my budget that is increasing year after year.
Okay. Okay, very well. So we need to integrate security at all stages of the life cycle of development of systems is also what I heard. I think that was a very important key point. Gentlemen, what you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on one of the points that Herve mentioned, which is understanding risk. Sure. Because I think the media industry in general is starting to recognize that they have these very, very high value assets. And that the kinds of assets, even if it's not a blockbuster title like Game of Thrones or a major Marvel motion picture, that there's a certain amount of impact that the assets themselves carry. Especially if it's a news feed or if it's social content that can be taken out of context, that you need to have a very deep understanding of what effect a compromise of that content can mean, and you need to design your security strategy based on that. And that's as true in a cloud-connected world as it is, the physical world with broadcast.
Sure. So you're still risk-based approach to security, depending on the model and the business model, and then the security model that you want to adopt that makes best sense for your business. Okay. Go ahead.
I mean, I think some of the other way, I mean, previously, the broadcast industry used to be quite segregated, right? There used to be some sort of air-gapped type of system where broadcast is broadcast and no one touches broadcast except through a broadcast endpoint, and this is IT, and IT doesn't know broadcast. So, but just because of the way that news is being expected from an end user's perspective, a customer perspective, it's not allowing you to continue this way, right? You have to make systems more connected. You have to be able, for example, in a news broadcast, you typically, at the end of it, you'll see, for a particular news program, you'll see Twitter feeds coming online, you'll see other social media responses, you'll see stocks or the weather.
And you want to integrate all that.
And that's not happening through an air-gap system, right? So you're becoming ever more connected. And the traditional approach towards doing that is just is no more valid. The business doesn't allow you to do it, and in order for you to be able to meet the requirements, you have to make more convergent infrastructure and environment. And that in and of itself is going to increase the risk. And since broadcast industry traditionally hasn't built secure systems, it's becoming a challenge, right? So, I mean, since a lot of these people from broadcast industry, and that same risk, like Joe mentioned, that's the same risk that's going to be moved across if you start using a cloud environment, right? So just because of the business, you're having to change the way you're doing work. And also, another point is, organization-wide, does your organization, is it designed to do security for system? Like Herve mentioned that now they have a security person in the project right from inception, right? Which it should always be the case, right? If you build a system securely right from inception, you don't do a patching job at the end of it, right? But I think we as people who are from a security background, we should reach out to the industry, right, on the broadcast side, actually work with them and partner with them to start doing this thing a bit more seriously, because anyone who's built up a broadcast system will see they are not very secure, and the adoption rate they're doing to make secure systems is not as fast as you'd expect, considering the impact is greater if a system is hacked.
Sure. So let me pause here for a second. We will come back to a similar point in a later question, but I want to kind of jump the discussion forward to data governance. And I'm not sure if Joel, you want to take a shot at the question, but how does the move to cloud impact data governance in general, or more specifically in media and broadcast?
Certainly. So I think governance in particular, there's a number of different facets to it. You've got issues around privacy. How are you protecting, protecting your core content, protecting the information of your audience, and there's also the maintaining the integrity of your process, whether that's pre and post production, whether that's distribution and streaming, asset archive, and so on. So the governance elements, at least in the U.S., the industry is self-regulated. There is no government oversight of that's going to force identity and access control, or force encryption, or enforce license management. It's the motivated self-interest of the content holders and the content creators, who are being fed by either ticket sales or by advertisers. They're interested in protecting their intellectual property. So the governance tends to be around, how do I secure my revenue stream? How do I protect my property from exploit? I think as things move into the cloud and you have more integration across both different supply chains and different types of media, whether it's feature content or episodic or news, that the same problems or the different problems that affect these different entities today are going to start, I don't know if this is the right word, but homologating across all of the different channels and different types of media. So it really is incumbent upon the creators and the distributors to understand, what their self-regulatory concerns are, and excuse me, to understand where those risks lie, and what the tools are that exist. You know, what I was going to add to Asaf's point is that there's an element in the security life cycle that we tend to ignore, and that's the weak link in any of these security systems. When we have these kinds of conferences and we have the discussions around security for cloud, unfortunately we tend to be preaching to the choir. I warrant that a lot of the folks that are in the room today or watching online, they're already security experts. They know that these are issues to be concerned with. They may not know all of the logistics behind how they can better protect themselves, sure, but they understand the need. The real risk is coming from the people who are not technology experts. They're certainly not security experts, and they don't want to be bothered with the notions of, I need to change my password. I need to use encryption.
So let me try to challenge that for a second. You're saying that all of our security teams are great and all of our technology teams are security savvy, and the problem is not there, but the problem is mostly the end user.
No, I think that in the last presentation, he made an interesting analogy of the secure 100 and the toasted 400.
Sure.
I think there are going to be those large media organizations that do have a better handle on their security requirements.
So just for the sake of context, you're referring to a previous session where the speaker was talking about most of the Fortune 500 organizations are actually vulnerable to so many attacks. Actually, more than 400 are probably already compromised. So that's just for the sake of context. But go ahead.
Yeah. So and I see this every time I am on a panel or I'm presenting about security. That unfortunately, the people who come to my session are ones who are already into security, and they're not the ones that I need to talk to. It's the people that are the creatives. It's the people who are the production crew. It's I don't want to offend the folks in the room. It's the camera operators. It's the people who may not necessarily be part of that security infrastructure.
On that note, we have a lot of people that are watching us today and attendees that are here to understand what the move to the cloud mean for security, but what would you recommend to them in their organizations to do to help facilitate that move if it was a strategic move for them?
Yeah,
from a security point of view.
Yeah, and I think where that goes to is being more aggressive in security awareness and security education.
Sure.
And that it's not just IT people and building systems. You have to push that out into into the more social channels of the people, because your weakest points, it's always going to be the end user, because they're the ones that are subject to social engineering attacks or other mechanisms of manipulation that is really going to be, that's the back door into your network, that's the back door into your archive, is somebody putting a sticky note with their password on their workstation, or not using multi-factor authentication on their social media account.
Sure. And this is interesting because we were discussing earlier integrating security at the system and technology level, but you were also saying we should integrate security across the entire organization, so at the operations, people, process aspects to achieve the desired security for the organization. In this industry, specifically media and broadcast, we're in the business of disseminating information and collaborating on information. It gets tough because the job for security is to try to secure sensitive information, isn't it? How do you manage to do that in that type of environment? If you were working for a three-letter agencies or more sensitive type or deal with more sensitive kind of data, it's much easier to secure around those. You work in an industry where you have to prepare data, package it in certain format, and send it out to the world to see and consume. How do you balance the two?
I think that's where this concept of cloud really comes in handy. I think if it was just a proprietary environment, a standalone on-premise setup, the access to skill sets and the access to the global SOC setup isn't available for an on-prem security. So when speed is the name of the game, and if time is of the essence, so having that expertise from a cloud service provider who's able to secure you and secure all the media assets comes in handy, because then they play a key role in that value chain of disseminating information, of taking care of giving that security wrap on the content before it goes out. I think that's where, not just from a scaling point of view to be able to absorb to the demand, but also to be able to take it faster to the market, to the audience, is where I think a cloud service provider plays a key role. And that's where cloud has a key driver. And that's part of the reason why I said, if the organization's strategy is to faster time to market, to be able to take the news faster to my audience in a safe and secure with authentic information, that's where I think a cloud service provider plays a handy role.
It's a good way of putting it. I like that very well. Anyone wants to add to
I'll
that?
just make one point. You did make the point there that your cloud service provider gives you that level of security. The cloud does have the tools to allow you to be more secure. We deal with an awful lot of organizations who have had the tools and have misused them. So it's very key to make sure that if you are using them, just a couple of examples, storage buckets being left open and public. There was a big case in the US where a police force was storing all of their body camera information to the cloud, all totally open to the public. The tools are there, they've got to be used correctly, and you've got to be able to audit exactly what's happening, whether it's on-prem or in a cloud environment. You've got to be able to have that visibility to audit. Second point I'd like to make there as well is also you've got to know where your data is. The number of organizations we go into and they say, well, we're not using the cloud yet, we're thinking of migrating to the cloud. We'll do an audit and we'll find out, yes, they're not using the cloud, as in the infrastructure as a service, but they're using so many different software as a service platforms, whether it be Box, Dropbox. Information has been in all different areas that they just didn't know about. It's shadow IT. It's things that are being used, that are applications that are being used that are unauthorized. I think sometimes before we think of the move to the cloud, we need to just make sure we know where our data is and exactly, we've got that bit nailed, and then start to think about, right, let's move that, let's secure everything, now move it to the cloud.
Great. Excellent.
Good.
So just to make you aware of the time, we have 5 to 10 more minutes, and we also want to take audience questions. So let's end with that comment. We'll take one more question and then go towards the audience for more questions. Go ahead, Joel.
No, I'll save it for the follow-up.
Okay. So cloud service providers argue they provide better security than what most organizations have to offer in terms of security. Do you agree or disagree? Just briefly.
Well, I guess that one I can jump on. So, from a certain perspective, I would say that yes, that a large-scale cloud provider, if we're talking about one of the big three or four, so Microsoft Azure, AWS, Google, IBM, they all have significant investment in security infrastructure, whether that's the operation of the platform or the fundamental design, engineering, and overall service management. Within Microsoft, we have thousands of people that are focused on security, whether it's secure design and development up front to security management and implementation of policy and process and everything just across Microsoft, whether it's the development channel or whether it's the cloud operations side. The amount that a company like Microsoft can invest in security operations is not going to be matched by any kind of organization other than another large-scale cloud provider. So if you look at it on a sheer scale of investment, a small production company, a broadcaster, it would eat their entire annual budget to try to implement that same level of security goodness, within their environment of what we do. So you can leverage that. I agree.
You think we should move to the cloud, and specifically your cloud, Microsoft Cloud, right?
Sure. Why not? But again, back to the point I raised at the top of this session is that, on the one hand, yes, the cloud provider, is going to have much more solid infrastructure, but, you have to do it right. The biggest hacks that we've seen in public, whether it was Sony Pictures, the Larson Studios hack that resulted in things like Game of Thrones being leaked, these were all because it was misuse of the platform. They didn't have firewalls in place. They weren't doing access control. They didn't, they had content in places that they didn't know where it was. So, all of the best investments and, the best intentions of security are great, but it's the danger of making those kinds of assumptions and not really understanding what's in play. You're still going to shoot yourself in the foot.
Fair enough. The summit is about the future, and if we think 10 to 20 years from today, I argue we won't need TV anymore because we're all going to be on smartphones. What do you think about that, Herve, being in the broadcast?
I don't care.
You'll go digital with us.
I'm not sure that people will watch only smartphones. Will TV be a TV? There will be some displays. Some of them will help us to have phone calls at the same time as we watch video. I'm pretty sure that in homes we will have displays. Call it a TV, call it a big smartphone or whatever, or a tablet, I don't know. There will be screens. There will be images. There will be videos.
But I mean traditional satellite-based broadcasting versus
my own feeling is that already today, but nothing to see with security, but
sure.
In the last 10, 15 years, we've talked about broadcast and digital and trying to separate the world in broadcast and digital. I think it's over. I think tomorrow we will have linear and non-linear.
Got it.
Is the linear TV coming through 5G, IPTV, DTT or whatever? It doesn't matter. There will be a linear stream of content, and at the same time there will be non-linear streams of content. Some of them will use the same networks. Some of them will be dedicated to certain networks, and that's fine. That's the way it will go. And yes, probably that in 10 years, most of the linear audience will go through a 5G network. And so what? Instead of paying a tower co company to have amplifiers and so on, we will pay a telco company to provide megabytes. And we will run OTT business instead of TV business. That's fine for us. The content will be the issue. And the way we process and we deliver the content. And the way, I think the biggest change for us will be probably the way we advertised. Because for the time being, there are two worlds, the TV advertising and the digital advertising, and they are really different.
Sure.
My feeling is that probably in 10 years, when you will be watching this big screen, call it the way you want, sure. Would it be an advertising playback by a server somewhere in Paris, or would it be somewhere an ad server, digital, somewhere in the cloud that will provide you with a dedicated advertising? It's a question that will completely challenge our economic models.
Sure, very well. I want to pause the questions from here and give a chance to the audience. We will probably take 3 questions. We have enough time for that. If we have more time, then we'll take more. But let's go ahead and open up for the audience. Whoever has a question, you can ask a specific panelist or just ask a general question for anyone. Please go ahead. Just 1 second. Take a mic, and there you go. You're on air.
Just a question for the panel. A lot of the focus has been on securing the technology, but a lot of the security risks and the leaks have all been down to people. How do you go about securing that, whether it's cloud or on-premise? If someone's put their password in a post-it on, what's stopping a cleaner looking at the password is and logging in? You can mitigate it using two-factor authentication or other means. But the biggest issue, particularly maybe in broadcast, where people might not be security aware, is usually the people. What are you going to do about that, or what's the solution?
And I think we touched on it, but if you want to...
I can give some points from broadcast point of view. It's something we've been looking at. Yes, and you said so, that the end user, I think that once again, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, we give people a lot of freedom with the IT usage. I think that we will step backward a bit. We will have to give people constraint, as little as possible, but we will have to give people constraint. And yes, for us, as a news organization too, we got plenty of journalists, freelancers working on our systems. We redesigned our news channel system 2 years ago. We completely rethink what is the separation between the corporate IT, mail, internet access, and so on for journalists, and the newsroom tools, video editing, rundown, and so on. And it was a nightmare at the beginning for us to say, okay, do we try to design one workstation with everything? And we know that the security was the issue, nothing else, just the security. Do we put 2 PC on the same desk, which is not very sexy? And we end up with a solution with Huawei based on a private cloud with a virtual desktop interface, and try to have one layer with one screen, one keyboard, one mouse for the user, but then 2 virtual machines, but not telling a journalist it was virtual machines, just saying you got 2 environments, one for news and one for other things, with some bridges in between. And it's not obvious for the journalist to use it. It's not easy for technical people to explain about it. But we think we got the right balance, and we will extend this philosophy to TF1 now. It was just for the news channel. We will extend it to the complete news operation, because we think we got, for the time being, and I'm not telling that we will stick with that for 5 years, but for the time being, we think we got the good balance between flexibility of usage, security, effectiveness of work, because we have to issue the news, we have to publish a bulletin every 10 minutes. And yes, but the user was the key of the problem for us. How to make sure that we protect himself from doing a mistake on the system.
So, just going to say that I think some of or at least 2 of the answers were embedded in your question. One is simplicity. That the easier you can make it for the user to adopt, then the more likely it is that they are to actually do it and follow through. And the other is the awareness of that you really do need to put a concerted effort into training even your novice users around the importance of behaving in a secure way on whether it's password hygiene or information they put on social media, accessing their personal email from a corporate machine. There's a lot of different things that just really fundamental security points that can go a long way in an organization to protecting them. But you can also do a fair amount on the IT side of locking down your environment based on what do people really need access to. So if your end user is your greatest risk, what are the things that they really need access to? And can you limit them in a straightforward and simple way, so that if you have high value assets, is that something that user needs? Do they need access to the broadcast console? Do they need access to archives? And if they don't give it to them. And that also goes a long way, because then if the end user is the one who gets compromised, you're limiting the scope of that breach.
Okay, thank you very much. Did anyone else have additional questions? Any questions? All satisfied and happy? Very good. Okay, I think it's time to conclude this session. Thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you very much for coming and sharing your experiences and thoughts. And that will be it for this session. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.